ever, anywhere in nature, once in the universe. We have not been everywhere in the universe, but wherever we never found anything as complex as a cell. A cell looks like, as today, more like a super nano computer with a digital technology, nano robots. I just point out, you notice there was a kind of robot walking on 2 legs, small mammals. You saw that? They're actually there. They actually found that there are kind of molecules which has legs which transport other molecules from one end of the cell to another kind of the cell, forth and back and like that. The complexity is just astounding, and it's just the top of the iceberg. They're not hardly even scratch the surface of what's there. You know, they're just discovering more and more and more. And the question is, where does all this come from? How did it arise in the first place? And the plain answer is that there is no theory that can explain it. They have no theory. It's you hear, this is a quote from, it's from '98, but it's as true today as it was 15 years ago. One biochemist, he says here, today as we leave the 20th century, we still face the biggest unsolved problem that we had when we entered the 20th century. How did life originate on Earth? The plain answer is, there is no idea how it has arisen. So that's actually, I have here, it's just, Prabhu in 1974, like that, the scientists must admit that they still do not know the origin of life. They claim that they will soon prove a chemical origin of life is something like paying someone with a post-dated check. It's not good enough to say we will do it in the future, Prabhu said. We want the proof now. And it didn't happen in 75, it don't happen today. And it looks, becomes, for every day that goes on, that task is just more and more hopeless to explain life just as pure chemistry. In other words, there is no real theory of evolution as things stand today. There is no theory of evolution. And there's another quote here from another biologist who wrote here, we should reject as a matter of principle the substitution of intelligent design for the dialogue of chance and necessity, but we must concede that there are presently no detailed Darwinian accounts of the evolution of any biochemical system, only a variety of wishful speculations. Or, I just skip here, I just conclude with this one. This is Dr. Richard Fountain in 1976. Anyone knows him? This is our Sariputta, one of our favorite scientists, high Christian scientists, who in 1976, this is in front of Srila Prabhupada, he precisely was arguing with these complex structures in the cell that we will show there. We'd like to argue that the chance and molecular forces theory won't explain things like this, but to say that it is an intelligent designer would be a sensible explanation. So that's, I'm in for that today. Next time, which I guess will be next Monday. Will it be next Monday?
Next Monday there will be this
decided course. So we do it in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks from now again. There I'll get into actually what do we mean by intelligent design, and how can we, give arguments and conclude that something is intelligently designed.
We will announce it also on Facebook.
Yeah. You had a question, was it?
We are sitting here and trying to refute Darwin, and the section that you showed a descent from Darwin, it just includes 1800 scientists, which I don't know, it's very few percentage of the entire scientists that we have in the world. So, have you been to any scientific conference, or have you seen any scientists refuting in a scientific conference Darwin's theory, and what was the opposition, or what was their defense?
Oh, yeah, I've been to scientific conferences, but like the mainstream conference on biology like that, or lecture on biology, generally you cannot do it. You would job. Scientists will lose their jobs if they do it. Or
they try to
to open.
refute
Yeah. There was one example. I was not there, but there was one example in around year 2000, and there was a Chinese paleontologist. The paleontologist is one who studies fossils. His name is Chen. He's a world famous paleontologist, and he was giving a lecture in Seattle, actually, and he was talking about some fossil discoveries in China, which very much goes against the theory of Darwin's. And he was saying there, and he was saying actually these fossils, they have some implications for Darwin's theories can be very difficult explaining these fossils here. And then someone in the audience asked, "Are you not afraid of questioning Darwin?" And then Chen, this Chinese paleontologist, he looked at this man and said, "In China, you can criticize Darwin, but not the government. In America, you can criticize the government, not Darwin." That's the situation. So, but it's so many scientists who actually are critical of evolution like that don't speak up because they will lose their job. They will be, somehow they'll get a lot of trouble. But some scientists they speak up, and it's generally someone who are extremely established, that they have tenure. You know this expression?
Sorry?
Tenure means that's a scientist. When he has tenure, I mean he has a job and he cannot be fired. And that's kind of after 7 years when you're established and like that, and to a university, you're such a valuable person, then you get a tenure. To keep the top scientists, then they give them tenure so that they cannot fire them, and they get so much facility to whatever they want. So many of them, they often have to be very quiet until actually they're really established. Or they are so old, they are retired. But they are there, and I know several. I'm in contact with many scientists who are skeptical and critical of Darwinism like that, and who also are together. There are groups of scientists who just who are on their own, and they are critical of Darwin. 800 is not many, but we didn't say that all the scientists who were critical of Darwin on this list. But someone will say that nobody, and this list shows it's not true. It's not nobody. No, you have scientists, and if you didn't know, but there was scientists from top scientific organizations in the world, including American Association for the Advancement of Science, North American Academy of Sciences. They're like the top American scientific institutions. There are scientists from there who put their name on that statement. And another point is, it's not what is true, what is false, is not determined by numbers. You cannot take majority votes to establish what is true and what is false.
The question that Darwin, he himself, sometimes developed his own theory. So my question is, how Darwin theory got powerful because of because of him, or somebody has pushed the
Darwin pushed
theory?
Darwin pushed his theory a lot. He was very, and he had others that were pushing those. Darwin, Darwin. Any person who is a little bit intelligent will doubt anything. And maybe because Darwin, of course, there were problems with his theory, but he was quite convinced about it. And there's a story about Darwin that in the very last months of his life, he completely rejected his theory and he became a converted Christian and like that. There's a story like that. That story is probably not true. There's no real evidence that actually this has happened, except there's one testimony testimony of one American lady who was a friend of the Darwin family and visited, and later on gave a testimony. And she was a very strong Christian, and she said she had a talk with Darwin, and the way actually Darwin rejected his whole theory about that. And maybe he did with her, because Darwin was a very polite man who didn't really want to offend anyone. He was living in a village. He was known as a very kind and gentle man. He was he had 10 children. He was a very good father. He was a very good neighbor. People liked him, and he didn't really, in one sense, like confrontation. So maybe he just was polite to this acquaintance, this lady like that. I don't know. But if you look at his, because we have so much from Darwin, he wrote something like 10 books. We have like 6,000 letters from Darwin still. Darwin was extremely prolific in writing. So he wrote to so many people, scientists, trying to convince them of his theory. And we still have he wrote at least 6,000 letters in his time. And so that gives a very good idea about, actually, not only what he stated officially in his books, but also in private conversations where he might be more candid, more open in some ways. And also there's a biography written by his son, Frank Darwin, who wrote a biography of him, and he doesn't mention anything about his father having changed his mind at the last stage of his life.
But that's my question. That actually Darwin theory is so extremely aggressive, picking out God with extreme effectiveness, so that the heart must be extremely against God. But Darwin was not like this, so somebody has pushed the Darwin theory.
Darwin is
into such an effective. That's my question.
I mean, there were definitely famous pushers of Darwinism, pushers of Darwin, promoters of Darwinism were Thomas Huxley was one very famous one. In Germany, Ernst Hegel was a very famous promoter of Darwinism. They became very outspoken. Like Huxley was traveling around debating, and more than that, they were also, in one sense, couping the key positions at the universities and at the publications of scientific journals. It was a kind of conspiracy with Darwin, with Huxley, with Tyndale, with Spencer, and there was a whole group like that who wanted to actually minimize the power of the church. Darwin's family, Darwin himself was from a liberal family, where actually they were against the church. Although Darwin, in his younger days, he was trained to become a priest, because that's interesting. But he didn't really believe it. I mean, it's sometimes presented as Darwin was very Christian and religious in his young days. And actually, in my book here, this is a story I present. It's kind of the official story. Darwin was very Christian, a very literal believer of the Bible when he was young. But by his travels and observations, he kind of first became skeptical, doubtful, and like that, and kind of more became agnostic like that. And that's actually the official biography written by Darwin himself. Darwin wrote his own biography also, but there's good reason to think actually he didn't really present the real picture. It was a biography not to be published as such, it became published, but actually it was just written for his children. So there he wanted to give a certain impression of himself that probably was not completely true. And actually from his very young days he was an evolutionist all the way, because actually his grandfather was also one of those scientists who had written on evolution. The theory of evolution was also written by his grandfather, who was a very famous man actually in the 1700s. And he wrote a very popular book, where at that time it was called transmutationism, which later that was a word for evolution that his grandfather used. And it seems that in the family this idea has been passed on. Darwin's father was was definitely not a very religious person. He was a very materialistic man. Doctor, very greedy for money. It was also, because Darwin was born in a family, a very wealthy family. His father was extremely wealthy, and he also married into a very wealthy family. So actually, Darwin never had to work his whole life. That's why he could speculate and travel. But what happened was also that his father wanted him to become a doctor like himself, so he sent him to Cambridge to start to become a doctor, but Darwin couldn't, I think he was too stupid to become a doctor. Maybe it's not, but that's what at least his father kind of was very disappointed with him. And then they concluded if you cannot become a doctor, then you can become a priest. And then he started studying theology to become a priest, because it was also if you want to become a priest, an Anglican priest, you get a good job, it's respectable, it's not too much work, and like that. That was the main reason why he started to become a priest. But he never completed it. Then, after a couple of years of studies, then he was invited to come and join a ship called Beagle that was about to leave on a 5 years world tour. And Darwin joined there, and actually when he came back, he wrote a book about his travels with the Beagle. Very well written, book about his travels and what he saw, and he was observing as a scientist like that. It's a very, if you want to read a good book about travel, then it's a really good book. And it became a very popular book, and Darwin became famous after that because of that book was published. So then from then on he became famous. But there was a group. Darwin was part of a group that was definitely trying to minimize the influence of the church by pushing God out from the world of science. And they succeeded very well. And Darwin's role in it, he tried to just be the neutral scientist, at least have that image, the profile of just a neutral scientist, and he's it's more just probably not completely true. Yeah, it's just more like that. Anything else?
It was just about this clip that you showed.
About what?
This clip, or this animation which is made of the cell.
Yeah.
It was just like, what are these proteins or like these kind of machines? Is that also consciousness, or what? How can it happen?
I don't know. I don't know. Of course, the assumption is it is completely automated processes.
It looks nice. This guy was walking from one side of the cell to the other.
I just have, my personal belief is that it's too amazing to be completely automated, and the super soul must be involved. But it's just my opinion, and what's the use of that? At least, what you can say, it's every possibility. It might just be, it could just be the super soul. No one has demonstrated that it's just purely automatic processes. Right.
This theory of evolution looks so speculative. Generally, the scientific norms are that you have hypothesis, then you prove this is so didn't because this looks purely speculative. If we see the theory of evolution, didn't Darwin face any rejection or opposition in the beginning itself?
Plenty. most of the scientists of this day didn't accept it. And some have the idea that it was only kind of the church and the religions that were, protesting against Darwin. But actually they were the least, they didn't really protest that much. The church pretty quickly accepted it. But it was his own colleagues, they were really arguing against it. But a lot of those scientists, somehow or other, they became sidetracked, and those who were against Darwin, because there was some conspiracy going on. But you take a lot of those famous scientists of the 1800s. I showed you this picture of this Agassiz. Actually, maybe you've not heard about him, but he was very big in his time. Pasteur? Pasteur, yeah.
From Belgium.
Was not French, Belgium. So I think he's almost as famous scientist as Darwin. And when you drink milk, it's pasteurized. And he was the one who discovered vaccination and so on. And he was very much, on scientific grounds, completely against Darwinism and evolution. Calvin was against it, and there are names like Owen, and you don't know all these names, but they were most were, I say, majority of scientists of 1859 and like that were against it. But somehow the whole tide changed, and a new generation of scientists came in and took over, and the old scientists somehow were pushed aside. That seems like that's actually what has happened. And that happens in the world of science, these kind of upsets.
But if you go into detail, there are so many unanswered questions.
Yeah, there's only unanswered questions. I mean, it's
So it seems a little bit time from Krishna conscious, but there has to be a group of other people who have pushed the Darwin theory superficially into the conviction of the common man. It's such an extreme, powerful thing.
Yeah, and that happens, by by publication and education. You have the core scientific community, which actually can be quite few people, and they dominate everyone, mainly through education and publication. And most have just been told when it comes to scientific facts. They're just told it's like this and this and this and this, without and that's also, because there's so many topics in the scientific topics that we cannot all get into all the details and like that. So generally we read in a book, it's stated it's like this and this and this and this, and we accept it, we believe it generally. Very few can really go down to the original literature, experiments, observations, and actually. So how did they reach that conclusion like that? And we don't do that.
But it's too subtle. It's too subtle.
Time consuming, and I guess most people are not in the world of science or in the world of academics, for that matter. But if you do it, it's not that it's difficult as such to really do it. Then actually you discover that a lot of what is accepted as facts, not only here in terms of evolution, biology, but in most fields of science and history and medicine and so on, actually, some of it is highly questionable. Some of it is, you see, actually is completely false, but it's presented as being fact. And my opinion is that it's more the rule than the exception, actually. It's like that. And you see that also that, what everyone accepts today as fact, or actually say what was accepted as fact maybe 30 years ago, 50 years ago, today we have rejected that, now we have some other facts. discovered they were wrong, and now we know it's like that. So that means also 1 generation from now, they will look at what we think is facts, and they'll just say that they were completely wrong. You know, now we know something else.
My spiritual master, he was at a conference that was speaking about this black matter or black hole theory, something like that. And this professor, he was speaking, and then my spiritual master, he asked if this was a fact or if it was like theory. And then the professor said, this is a fact. And then he spoke on, and then my spiritual master, he asked again, so this theory of yours, what makes you think that we have seen so many theories through times coming and going, and what makes you think that this theory will not change in a couple of years and another theory will take over? And then the professor who just said that it was a fact, he said, well, that would be very nice, it would make me happy because that would have meant that we have evolved. So he just said that everything he spoke about is completely nonsense. No fact, no nothing, everything was just speculation. And I think most of it that's going on is like that.
Yeah, I mean, except you know, certain things you can directly observe and measure. So that's kind of trivial. You know, you can observe, you know, something like this. Oops, drops. You know, so you can see some. You know, that's kind of trivial. But when it becomes more subtle and you want to explain what's behind phenomena, and especially want to go back in history and explain what happened in the past, it becomes very speculative and very often very biased, and turns out to be, you know, very, very questionable. As I say, I think it's more the rule than the exception that is the case. So therefore also, you know, in one sense, one should not become impressed just because someone says I'm a scientist and I have a PhD and I'm saying such and such. One shouldn't be impressed by that. He can be just as wrong as anyone else. He can be more massively wrong than the common person. He can also be right. I mean, it doesn't mean because one is a scientist, one is by definition wrong.
He can be wrong in a very intellectual way.
Yeah, and he can also be right. And it's not, you know, Prabhu was not against science. We are for science. We want more science. We want better science, and we don't like all kinds of pseudoscience presented in the name of science. This is what we are objecting to. But we like science actually.
You said that we should not be impressed if someone says that I'm a scientist, I have a PhD.
Mm.
My thought was just, is it, at least theoretically it's possible, but is it possible that a person who's just very wealthy, he just buys himself a PhD or a title or a seat in a scientist?
Generally, you can do that, but at one point it'll be exposed and you'll be...
You can also get it if he's a nice guy and they like him in the university, isn't it like that? He can present something.
You can get an honorary degree here, honorary PhD.
By being a nice guy.
No, but they're very selective with that. I mean, someone who gets an honorary PhD, I say that's it's much more difficult than to get a regular PhD you work for, and it's very exceptional to get an honorary PhD. It means you've done something that is so outstanding that it's just, you know, you take the title.
But still, for example, it's possible to restrain the senses for quite some time, even maybe also many years. But eventually, if you're not really Krishna conscious, then you will bloom. So even the greatest scientist who can do very